So our last speaker for this morning session, an old friend and long-time supporter and teacher of Gaia, Stephan, who's been working just down the road from here at Schumacher College for many years. So, Stephan, what can we learn from your experience of teaching Gaia?
Thank you very much. So, this is the teaching Gaia. That's me at Schumacher College in Dartington, where I've been working teaching Gaia for the last almost 30 years. I met Jim when he taught the very first course at Schumacher College, and met Tim shortly after. So, Gaia 2.0. This is a term that's taking off. It's really important. So, how can we teach Gaia 2.0? What are some of the key points? Well, some of the key ideas in Gaia 2.0 are this idea of self-regulation, personal action, which is based on our own conscious choices. So now we bring the idea of, or the concept of consciousness into Gaia 2.0. We've heard this quite a lot during this meeting, that consciousness is really important. So let's delve a little bit into what consciousness might be and how we might begin to work with consciousness to move us towards Gaia 2.0. Here we are. What constitutes conscious choice? So we need a really good psychologist to help us with this. And I think the best psychologist in Western culture is obviously Carl Gustav Jung, who needs to be resuscitated, revived, revered, and learnt from, big time. Not Freud, thank you very much, he was great, but Jung is the person we need to listen to. What does Jung have to say about consciousness, and how does that relate to Gaia, and how we can teach Gaia? Well, he talked about 4 different ways or 4 functions that consciousness has. So one of them is thinking. And we're really good at thinking. Most of the meeting has been about thinking. Science is about thinking, so we're very familiar with thinking. Then there's the opposite of thinking, which he called feeling, which is more about valuing. How do we value things? That, for me, has to do with beauty, with a feeling, a sense of beauty, how important are things. These are opposites. Then we have intuition. Jim is very big on that. He's talked about intuition. And finally, we have sensing. So I think if we're going to move towards Gaia 2.0 and we're going to teach Gaia 2.0, we need to work with these 4 ways of knowing. And if we do that really well and skillfully and give each one credence and equal value, we'll get to, hopefully, a really deep Gaia 2.0. So I want to show you how I've been teaching Gaia during my work by helping students at Schumacher College and beyond to develop these 4 ways of knowing in relation to Gaia. And I can tell you it really works very well. So thinking Gaia, well, this is what we're very good at here in universities. This is Earth system science, basically, developed by James Lovelock. There's Gaia appearing in his garden, making him look very happy, when he gets the Gaia insight. Lynn Margulis, both of whom have taught at Schumacher College many times. And what I do in my teaching of thinking Gaia is to use this basic feedback between the biota, rocks, atmosphere, water, which gives us Gaia as an emergent property of the planet as a whole. You're all familiar with this. I use the example of the long-term carbon cycle as a feedback and how that regulates the temperature of the planet over geological timescales. You're probably familiar with this. Many people in the room have worked on this, David Schwartzman, Tyler Volt, Tim, many other people. So I won't go into the feedback, but you know what it is. CO2 builds up in the atmosphere, the temperature builds up, rainfall increases. That increases biologically assisted silicate rock weathering, which then decreases CO2 in the atmosphere. And this acts like a negative feedback. Now, this is a very basic form of the feedback. But with my students, we go into this in great detail. We do some mathematical modeling. We go into the details of the science. We particularly look at the role of land biota here in weathering rocks like granite, which we have on Dartmoor. We look at the chemistry in detail. So we really go into the thinking very thoroughly. We go into the intellectual side of things very thoroughly. We look at the way life helps to weather rocks by breaking down rocks and secreting acid onto the rocks. We look at what happens with coccolithophores absorbing the results of the weathering, and also the diatoms that take up the silica and how they sink to the bottom of the ocean and get subducted under continents and then returned melted under a continent. New granite is formed, the CO2 is returned to the atmosphere. I'm sure you're all familiar with this, so I've gone through it very fast. But we do this very thoroughly. And so I make sure the students have a really good thinking grasp of this feedback and other similar feedbacks in Gaia, using the science that Tim has developed and Jim Lovelock and others. So, now we move to sensing. So what do we do with sensing? And who do we use for sensing? Who is our teacher in sensing? Well, here we use Goethe. You see, we're shifting gears completely now. Goethe was not only a great poet, he was also a great scientist. Oh, thank you, Tim. He was also a great scientist. And he developed a rigorous way for developing a sensory connection with nature. He worked with plants, he worked with color, and there are various steps that one takes in order to develop one's sensing and also one's intuition very rigorously. So not only Jung, I want to bring Goethe back into our attention. Thank you, Tim, that's lovely. That's fine, thank you. Jung and Goethe, there's a very strong connection between the two. So what do I do with my students in developing their sensing of Gaia? I take them out to Dartmoor. We do pilgrimages to granite. We're lucky that we live near granite, near Dartmoor. So this is Vixen Tour on Dartmoor. And we prepare ourselves to meet the granite. We think of the granite as a being, not just a lump of rock, but actually we think of it as a kind of granite temple. And we approach, as we would approach a temple, and we use this forest-based Shinrin-yoku from Japan, this forest-based therapy, which is very important to know about, Shinrin-yoku, where you slow yourself down, you calm yourself, and you just begin to approach nature as if it were a subject. Well, in fact, for me, of course, it is a subject. But you're meeting another personality, a non-human personality, and you open your sensory channels as much as you can through a process of relaxation and meditation. You begin to actually encounter the other through your senses. And it's wonderful how the granite comes alive in that sense, through this approach. So that's what we do with sensing. Now, what about intuition? Well, with intuition, you know that Jim is very keen on it. Here he says a quote from his latest book: "Human civilization took a bad turn when it began to denigrate intuition." So intuition is very important. What is intuition? Well, it has many layers. I think the deepest layer is when we intuit that Gaia really is some kind of goddess, as the ancient Greeks intuited, some kind of deep entity within the depths of the psyche. This is a picture of Gaia, the goddess from ancient Greece. Now, one of the people who can teach us about Gaia in the modern times is Jules Cashford, a mythologist and Jungian analyst. She says, could it be that the old image of Gaia has begun to speak to us from a region of the psyche beyond our rational control, in a new voice of an ancient harmony that is becoming again new, as though in answer to the crisis and opportunity of our time? So you see, in this view, Gaia is a primordial archetypal way of understanding nature, which is coming back into our consciousness, called forth by the very crisis itself. So this is a different approach, a depth psychological approach to Gaia. Now, goddess, we don't like goddesses anymore. We've banished the goddesses. So what might goddess mean for us today? Well, I think for us moderns, using a term that Bruno likes, the goddess might be a powerful intuitive sense of all the interaction networks within Gaia. That might be a sort of modern manifestation of goddess. All the feedbacks together, but not elucidated rationally, but understood intuitively with the help of reason, with the help of science. And these ancient ideas come from a very deep region of the psyche, which Jung called the collective unconscious, or the archetypal level, percolating up towards our conscious mind and our ego. And finally, how do we value Gaia? Valuing Gaia. Here I bring in Arnie Ness, who also taught at the college many times. And Tim did a course with him many years ago at Schumacher College, professor of philosophy at Oslo University, a great philosopher, mountaineer. And he pointed out that ecology is not enough. Ecology, the science of ecology, tells us loads of facts about nature, but that's not telling us how we should behave in relation to nature. To do that, we need the word deep, because that brings values into the picture. And when we put facts and values together, we get wisdom, which he called ecosophy. So value has got, it means that you actually appreciate the beauty and the importance of the thing that you're valuing. You appreciate its own independent existence and its importance for yourself, but also you appreciate that it has intrinsic value. So one of the key ideas or key insights from deep ecology is that all life has intrinsic value, irrespective of its usefulness to humans. All life is a subject. Everything is subjective. We live inside a great subjectivity, which has value, irrespective of how useful it is to us. And finally, one way I found of putting together these four ways of knowing, thinking, feeling, sensing, and intuition, is to do what we did yesterday, the deep time walk. So in that walk, some of you did that yesterday with me, every millimeter that we walk represents 1,000 years of our Earth's history. That in itself opens up your sensing, your feeling, your intuition. We've created a deep time walk app for smartphone, and we have a whole kit for going into the deep time walk, which has been developed by Rob Woodford, my friend and colleague, who's here, and some of you have met him. So I would encourage you to try that and use that if you want to. And finally, endorsements for the deep time walk. Bruno has liked it, Jim has liked it, various other people have liked it. And finally, from Arnie again, the remedy or psychotherapy against sadness caused by the world's misery is to do something about it. Thank you very much.
Amen to that. Time for some questions for Stephan. Okay, we'll start with Tim over here then. Can you indicate if you want to ask a question, just so you'd help me out? Stick your hand up.
Stephan,
Tim.
yes. Thank you for your wonderful leadership.
Yeah.
I've been a great admirer of yours. I'm going to raise one word, compassion. Where does compassion fit in all that you're talking about?
Thank you. I think real Gaia 2.0 is about compassion. I think when you have all those four functions working well in yourself, compassion spontaneously arises. You don't have to fabricate it or force it. It just spontaneously arises. It's what James Dyke said, about love. I think when those four functions are well balanced in yourself, love just comes out of you completely spontaneous. You just can't help it.
But aren't we isn't the system we're in now trying to smash compassion out of us?
Of course it is, but we have to resist that.
Well, that's why your final quote is so important.
Yes, we have to resist that. We have to develop compassion. Yes.
Great. Peter, who else has got a question? Just Peter, this.
Oh, yes. Hello,
Thank
Peter.
you a lot. That was really interesting. 3 words I missed were beauty, awe, and wonder.
Right.
And I wonder how that fits into your scheme. I'm sure it does,
Yes.
but
Well,
I just wonder how.
Beauty is very important. Beauty is, I think, connected with valuing. For example, when I'm in a forest and I feel its beauty, then I feel its immense value. I mean, it's very hard to describe. You need poetry to describe this, really. So valuing involves beauty, awe, and wonder. I think you get to that point of appreciating beauty, awe, and wonder when you have these four functions working well within yourself, when you've cultivated them consciously. You can consciously cultivate. In science, we cultivate thinking, which is very important. But we also need to cultivate the opposite of thinking, which is our valuing. Jung called it feeling, which is a bit confusing. It's not emotion. It's how do we value things? It's like valuing another person, someone you love. You value them, if you really love them, for who they are. We need to have that feeling as well towards Gaia. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. We could carry on, but I'm going to end it there. Let's thank Stephan again.